Ask the Dean, episode 83 with the marvelous MAPT team. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here, co-host rather, with the wonderful Verinia Granum. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, sir.
That is wonderful. Verinia, you are the former assistant dean in the Prehealth and STEM advising office at Hofstra University. Hofstra. Yeah, you got pinky up, nose up. Hofstra.
Not nose, not so much.
You have been with the MAP team now for several months, rocking and rolling, helping students one-on-one, both with their applications and in MAPT advising chat. For students who don't know, in MAPT, you can add on chat advising. And Verinia is one of the heavy hitters in there, helping students in MAPT.
Helping students out. I love it.
There you go.
Thank you.
Also with us, Dr. Scott Wright, a man who needs no introduction, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern and retired executive director at TMDSAS. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm just really enjoying getting to talk to tons of applicants and students who want to be successful. It's just real energy. Provides me lots of energy, and I love it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I know, Rachel, I think you and I had a conversation early on when you started talking to students in this kind of advising world outside of the MCAT stuff, and it's like, wow, it's just really invigorating and fun, and yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
Absolutely.
Sure is.
And Rachel Grubbs, co-founder of MAPT. How are you doing today?
I'm excellent. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes.
Yay.
Wunderbar. So we are here for you to answer your questions. If you're watching on Instagram, hello, I'll wave in front of the iPhone camera. If you want to come ask questions, I'm not looking at Instagram to pull the questions in. Go to mapped.tv to ask your questions there. We have a ton of questions ready to go.
Yeah.
Indeed we do.
All right. First one from Ryan. Wonderful name, Ryan. Is this clinical? I love this. We really need to get isthisclinical.com rocking and rolling. I direct and transport patients, answer patient questions, provide information about the COVID vaccine, provide food and water to patients with low blood sugar, and monitor them for adverse reactions. Yeah.
Sounds clinical to me.
Sounds clinical. Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Jyoti asks, hi, Prehealth committee at my college requires at least 5 academic letters. Oh my Lord. So that they can write a letter for me. They say I can submit letters from extracurriculars to them as well. What should I do? Well, Verinia, what do you think?
If you want the committee letter, then you'll have to sort of give them what they're asking for. In my experience at Hofstra, when we had our committee process, we would not have like a specific number of letters that we recommended, but we really just kept them on file. This was sort of the benefit. We kept them on file for students and then submitted everything as one big letter packet. So it wasn't like the student had to run around trying to, find all these other recommenders. So there is some positive to it. But if that's what they're asking for, you're going to have to do it.
Yeah. That's the simple thing. It says they require, if you want a committee letter, which you don't have to have a committee letter, but if you want one, then you got to do what they say.
Yep.
Yes, as simple as that. So I have a question for Verinia and Scott. Scott, while you were the former director of admissions at a medical school at UT Southwestern, you also were the dean of a pre-health advising office at UT Dallas as well. When and if you did this, when letters would come in for your committee letter, would you guide the student and say, maybe we shouldn't use this letter, it's not very good? Would you give that advice to students or no?
No.
Okay.
No, we never shared.
Do you think that's unethical to do that?
I do. I do, especially because in 95% of the cases, the student has waived access to know anything at all about that letter. And so I would find it personally unethical for me then to even give any kind of feeling about it, you know. So, yeah. And, you know, that's pretty rare. I mean, it's pretty rare to have a negative letter or even a lukewarm letter come in for a student. I mean, it does happen, but it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the chances are rare, but never zero.
Yeah, right. That's
possible, right. Not probable.
Possible.
Right.
Yeah. And I know it's so much harder now. I mean, so many things have become harder in the last 2 years. But what I used to always tell students is always ask your letter of recommender prospective candidate in person. These days, you know, maybe a Zoom call. But what you're looking for is the awkward pause. Right. If they give you an awkward pause, you want to give them a graceful out. And I know that's harder now, right? It's a lot easier to shoot an email. And if you've been talking to someone and have a strong relationship and they've praised you in the past, then an email is probably fine. Yeah. But if you're not sure, you know, and this is part of why we talk about, you know, freshman or sophomore year, if you're a career changer, when you're early in your prereqs, start talking to the professors about the possibility of it so you can build that relationship. Because, it's really on you as the student to know, is this person, you know, do they respect me and admire me enough to write a strong letter?
Right. Yep. Right. So a follow-up from GOT is specifically about the extracurricular. So they require the faculty ones, should they also add extracurriculars? And again, I think it goes to what we're talking about already is how well do those letter writers know you? How much are they going to add about who you are, potentially matching up to some of the AAMC core competencies? So yeah. Cameron asks, at what point do you send an LOI? I interviewed on December 10th. So letter of intent, potentially. Well, let's assume it's intent and not a letter of interest. Dr. Wright, what do you think? Letter of intent, very popular question this time of year.
Yeah, I think if you interviewed December 10th, I think it's appropriate now to send a letter. If you haven't heard anything yet from that school, go, you know, and it's like we've talked about before, a letter of intent is not going to be necessarily viewed as negative. So there's not really a downside unless you screw something up in the letter itself. But I would say, you know, now would be an appropriate time.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it also depends, just one extra caveat on what did the school tell you after you interviewed? Did they tell you it was going to be 6 weeks until you would hear something? Right. Then potentially don't bug them before that date.
Right. That's right.
Ahmad asks, can I talk about my high school experience getting my medical assistant certification and lead it with work that I've done in my personal statement, tying my high school experience with my residence? So this is a very common question that students love to talk about, the certification. I got my EMT certification. I got my medical assistant certification. The certification is useless in my mind, right? It's what did you do with that certification? So you don't need to talk about getting the certification. You need to talk about what it allowed you to do, which it sounds like was later on anyway, that you can write about. So people will want to put certification stuff in their activity descriptions, like have a specific activity of, I got my certification. I'm like, I don't care about that. You have another activity that says you're an EMT. You obviously had your certification. So those are less impactful things there.
Yeah.
I think students do that to show that they've had an interest from that age, right? Since high school, they were so motivated to do this that they got certified, which is great. But as Ryan was just saying, what did you do with that?
Yeah. I do think some of it too is just like, generally speaking, pre-meds like school. School's fun and school's rewarding. Yeah. I mean, I have that. I'm a yoga teacher, but I can't stop taking yoga teacher trainings because they're just really fun.
Yeah.
I might like them more than I like teaching. I like teaching. All right. Let's see.
From Charlotte, as a non-trad, is it okay to talk about a past office job serving my community with respect to public assistance programs in my application? It is completely non-related to medicine, and I was not a pre-med. I love this question, Verini. We talk about this all the time. Students, especially non-trads, mistakenly leave non-medical stuff off of their applications, which leads to huge gaps in their timeline and potentially big pieces of who they are as a person. What are your thoughts there?
You're absolutely right. I see that all the time. Of course, please include it, because it's part of who you were before this, right? You didn't just suddenly become a pre-med and not have anything prior to that experience. So it doesn't need to be just related to medicine. It doesn't need to be just related to clinical work and things like that. You had a past life, so to speak. Absolutely speak about it, but also it shows, there's things within that shows that you're also a great candidate for, a career in medicine, because you worked in the community, you helped people, you supported people. So it's even, any type of employment. You had a past life.
Scott, do you remember any students from your time at UT Southwestern, non-medical related activities that they did that you can still remember to this day?
Oh yeah, I absolutely do. We had one young lady who was a big part of the way that she supported herself in college was selling. I don't remember which cosmetic brand it was. It was one of those that you do from home. I want to say it was like Avon or something like that. Although I think Avon's like really old. So I think it was something sort of like that.
Yep.
Anyway, and she was from Vietnamese descent. And so she ended up going back to Vietnam for a gap year and went to Vietnam to establish this brand and give women in Vietnam who had no means of supporting themselves an option of you can do this to help sell these products and stuff. And it was enormously successful. And, when she came back to the application process, it was really a very compelling story and very compelling, idea that here was something that she did. She ended up taking 2 more gap years after that because it just took off so big in Vietnam. Wow. That she was just developing all these networks and stuff. And it was really an incredible story.
Yeah. Wow. Not related to medicine.
Not at all.
And you're still beaming about it to this day.
Oh yeah. It was, it was one of my favorite stories to listen to. And, and the funny thing was, we would not typically grant extra gap years to students who we had already admitted, but that was an example of somebody who were like, absolutely, if you want to take another year, you go do what you're doing because it's such a good thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was incredible.
We have this from some prior show, but it feels relevant again.
Yep, absolutely.
Be who you are, not who you think I want you to be.
Yeah, and that's a big message that we push here at MAPT. I know we have some close friends in the industry helping students, and they have completely opposite views. And I just couldn't disagree more with I'm going to tell you who you want me to be, how compassionate I am, and how motivated I am to help this one specific community. I'm like, just be yourself. Just be yourself.
Yeah. Yep. I just think in real life that would never work. Like if I meet someone and instead of just letting me get to know them, they start describing their personality, it's going to immediately seem insincere, If you say like, nobody's more compassionate than me, I'm like, I don't know, because compassionate people usually aren't hyper competitive.
Yeah, you're super humble too, aren't you?
Right.
Yeah, I'm the most humble.
That's right.
So
people have said I'm the most humble. People.
Yeah,
many people.
Everyone.
People are saying. All right. Okay. Focus up. Leanne Sarah.
Hi. Thank you for answering our questions every week. You are welcome. If you didn't know, we are here almost every single week at 1 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. And then I also do kind of a solo show on Instagram Live on Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern. So trying to answer as many questions as possible for you every week. I would like to know what undergrad GPA med schools screen out. Please. If only this were an easy answer.
Yep.
It's impossible to answer. I'm sorry, Leanne, Sarah. This is one we cannot answer because every medical school has something different. The far majority of schools do not publicly talk about these numbers to allow them some flexibility and what they're doing year in and year out. So the answer is do as best as you can do, and hope if you have a lower GPA that you have a good upward trend. And if you have specific questions about that, Leanne, I think should win our mapped access.
Yes, great idea.
For a year, and we'll give you access to the mapped advising chat. So you sign up for mapped or reach out to info@mapped.com. We'll get you set up with a free account for the year. You can put in all of your information and then reach out through the chat advising and say, okay, like
Mm-hmm.
here are my numbers. And then we can give you a little bit more specific information.
Yeah.
So Leanne, reach out to me at info@mapped.com. And just remind me that we talked about this today in the session, and we'll hook you up.
Yay, Leanne, Sarah. Woohoo.
All right, let's keep trucking. All right, Ryan asked this question last week. He's been very polite about coming back and asking again. So,
who is that as the avatar? Is that Odell Beckham 13? I don't know.
I think so. It looks like.
My advisor told me I need a REU or SURF type of research. Are those programs really that much better than working with small state schools with research projects? They're so cool. I don't even know what the heck they are. What are those?
So I'm not sure about REU. SURF stands for Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship. Okay. And so it's some medical schools, and I think they're funded by, I don't know if they're NIH funded or what. I'm not sure how they're funded, but they're a competitive process. You apply for them, and then you go into a 6-week program. You get paid to work for 6 weeks, 6 to 7 weeks in a research lab at a medical school for the summer. And so to me, the short answer to the question, Ryan, is no, those programs are not necessarily that much better than working with us, in any other kind of research capacity. I think it could be more expansive than what you might find at a small school or in a small lab. You're going to get a different experience. But in terms of what the admissions committee is going to look at, unless you're going into MD PhD program or something like that, that's really more hyper specialized, then I would say no, I don't agree with your advisor.
Yeah, so REU looks like it's from the National Science Foundation Research Experience for Undergraduates. So very similar type of program that you apply for. Yeah. It just screams of this kind of elitism to me of this is so much better because you have to apply for it and you have to be granted, you have to be privileged enough to get it. And it's just like, do research.
Yep.
And talk about how it's impacted you and make the best of it wherever you can get it. And so, I don't like that type of like elitism in that sort of.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that it's not just the name brand thing. It's the assumption of the money and time to do that, to do a program like that is, limited time, limited location, not necessarily paid. It just, we don't need more ways to only get doctors who are rich. There's nothing wrong with rich doctors, but we should have doctors who reflect our whole population, and not everyone's going to have the means to do those kinds of programs. And that's fine.
Yeah, I agree.
We want a symphony, a whole orchestra.
I love that.
Everyone needs an oboe player.
Well, speaking of that, that's so funny because on the admissions committee at Southwestern, we used to keep track of what instruments people played, because they would say in their application, "Oh, I'm a violinist," or "I do this," or I play the drums or whatever. And we would keep track so that we could have a good symphony in our medical school.
So that's the key to get into medical school?
No.
You have to play an instrument.
No. No.
Yeah.
But we don't want 14,000 trumpets and then no oboes or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
Gotta have an oboe.
I played the oboe, and I was only one of two in my orchestra.
That is literally the secret to get those special scholarships.
Yeah.
Is be that one person who plays the instrument that nobody knows about.
Oh, yeah. I was both second chair and last chair.
Yeah,
but I usually said I was second chair.
Nice.
Love it.
All right.
So
Madison asks, I've worked in the ER for about 6 months and love the staff. Would it be appropriate for me to ask a few nurses to collectively write me a letter of recommendation? Unfortunately, I don't work with the doctors as often. Scott, what do you think about this situation? We've talked about kind of previously, kind of not the PI, but other kind of research assistants potentially write a letter. We've talked about maybe residents or fellows and not the attending contributing to a letter. What do you think about here?
I like the idea. I think, especially if the nurses know you really well, and I like the idea of a collective letter that they all sign and say, this is our, idea about, I think it would be a stronger letter if a doctor was on the letter, but I'm not opposed to, I certainly understand if you don't work with the doctors that often and you really know the nursing staff much better, I would say go for it.
Yeah. And potentially asking those nurses to say, hey, it's kind of better to have a doctor sign off on this. Is this something collectively, maybe the 6 of you nurses and then Dr. Smith can kind of co-sign it with you all?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Great. Avery, I was born and raised in the great state of Texas. I went to college in Arkansas and Minnesota. I stayed in Minnesota after graduating, but my whole family lives in Texas still. Dr. Scott Wright, question for you. Would I still be considered a Texas resident?
Oh, my.
Womp, womp, womp.
So, Avery, there is a little complication to this question, but generally speaking, you would not still be considered a Texas resident. It depends a little bit on how long you've been in Minnesota. You don't really say that in the question, that you stayed in Minnesota. The only circumstance that would allow you to still be a resident of Texas in this situation would be if you could prove that the reason you stayed in Minnesota was temporary, and that your intention all along was to come back to Texas. But generally speaking, once you leave the state and stay out of state and you're not in school any longer, you've lost your residency.
Yeah. So I'll add on, Avery. This is going to be very state dependent.
Yes.
So Scott is talking about Texas. Scott, obviously, as the former retired director of TMDSAS, knows a lot about the Texas laws. I've worked with a student from Kentucky, I believe, Louisville, Kentucky, and they had a rule, at least when she checked, because she moved from Kentucky to Texas in the middle of the application. And I told her, reach out to Kentucky and ask, what are they going to think about you in terms of residency status? And Kentucky said, you graduated from high school here. Your parents are still here. We'll consider you as in-state. So it's just going to depend on each state. So for everyone else outside of Avery, think about that and just ask those questions to the schools and you can Google state residency requirements because that's what the schools are typically going to use.
And Avery, another thing that I would say is reach out to TMDSAS. They have, or even on their website, they have what's called a residency questionnaire that you can complete and give back to them, and they'll let you know on the front end of things what you're going to be considered.
Yeah. Golden Hobby. I love Sprite. I love it. I love that picture with the Sprite. In the activity section, would you recommend the storytelling approach in the experience description of all activities except publications? So I have a book, in case nobody knows, called The Premed Playbook Guide to the Medical School Application Process, where I have a whole chapter on experience descriptions. My general advice is I love stories. Storytelling can show impact. It shows who you are. And not every activity description will have a good story that goes with it. So the question here for all activities, no, not for all activities, but for ones where you can tell a good story, sure.
Yep, agreed.
Don't force it, but if it works,
especially in those that you identify as most meaningful, where you get that extra space, that's a perfect place for storytelling.
Yep. Bradley, is a lab instructor, example, OChem lab instructor, a sufficient recommendation to fulfill a, quote, core science professor letter of recommendation, or should it specifically come from the lecture professor? Verinia, what do you think?
This is somewhat of a tougher one. I guess it depends on who's teaching the lab, because I know, for instance, at Hofstra, sometimes we'd have TAs teaching the labs, or, you know, someone, not a grad assistant, but a teaching assistant, basically. And so you wouldn't want a recommendation letter. It's not going to count as a core science faculty person if it's a teaching assistant. So I guess that's the answer. It would depend on who's teaching the lab.
Yeah. Yep. Ideally, you want those fancy professors.
Yep.
With the patches on their elbows.
Yeah, and the pipe.
The tweed. Yes.
Yeah. Not weed, the tweed.
The tweed.
I don't know. It was an interesting tweed comment after a pipe comment.
Well, you never know. You never know. Some of these professors are pretty liberal. So.
Hey.
Oh, man.
That's funny.
Hello, Redface. This is awesome. Thanks for doing it. You're welcome. Rachel asks, no interviews so far this cycle. Sad face. My stats, 509 MCAT. Awesome. 349 science GPA. 372 cumulative GPA with no clear trend. I've worked in clinical research for 4 years, and I'm very proud of my personal statement. Any tips to improve for next cycle? So the big thing for me that stands out there is that no clear trend. What do you think about that, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would say a little bit of it depends on where you're applying, what schools that you've applied to. I would say it's also, if there's no clear trend and it's sort of, up and down, then it may well be that the medical schools are confused about who actually you are in terms of, as a student, are you this person or that person, if it's kind of going all over the place. I would say that signal to me is maybe one of the top ones. I would also say in terms of the clinical research for 4 years, that's great. I would say, I would wonder if you're emphasizing the clinical part of that enough in terms of, as opposed to the administrative part of that. And I would be, definitely getting more experience in clinical settings outside of what you're doing in the clinical research setting. If you don't have any, shadowing, or if you don't have, maybe I would get, try to reach out and get more clinical experience in a different setting that might set you apart in a new application cycle. So, yeah.
Yep.
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. Rachel, think about applying for application renovation. We are moving forward shortly with recording our next season. So if you go to medicalschoolhq.net/apply, you can apply for that.
Yeah.
I've been getting more and more comments that students are like, you are brutal on that show. I'm like, I just just pointing out things I think. I don't know. Sorry.
I keep hearing the word brutal too, but I also keep hearing it complimentary.
Yeah.
Like I talked to a student the other day who was like, yeah, I heard about you guys because I heard Ryan was the only one we could trust to be brutal. And I was like, yeah.
Wow.
Wow. I don't know about the only one, but yeah, he doesn't mince words. I mean, I think a good advisor is not going to avoid a tough conversation with you. Yeah, so application renovation is a great way to do that. I would also say, while we're talking about our shows, that Scott's Am I Ready is a great way to do that if you haven't applied yet and you're not sure if you're ready. So you can apply for either of those shows. So either I'm a reapplicant and I don't know what to do, or I'm not sure if I should apply this year or next year. I posted it in the comments, so it's not here on the clickable on the screen, but it's clickable in the comments.
Yep.
All right. Let's see.
Ryan asks, I'm applying this cycle. When should I ask for LORs? I was planning to ask in February. Is this too early? The LOR question. When should we ask, Verinia?
In the year that you are applying.
Yeah.
So now would be great. February is not too late. Sorry, it's not too early. That's actually the perfect time to start asking.
Yep.
You want to give your recommender some time also to write the letter before your application.
Right.
So the sooner the better.
Plus, I like February because a lot of students are working on their personal statements in January. And personally, I like for a student, when they request a letter, send a copy of your personal statement to the letter writer so they can get a picture of kind of what you're saying to the admissions committees in that personal statement. It also reminds them a little bit of your story and stuff like that. So
that's a good
idea. So I think February is a great time to do it.
Yep.
How is virtual shadowing viewed in this recent cycle? It is amazing, especially e-shadowing, basically only e-shadowing, not any of the other ones. Look, medical schools know that shadowing's been basically shut down, depending on where you are in the country. And so medical schools understand that one of the only ways to do things now is in a virtual way. And so there are lots of programs out there, virtualshadowing.com, web shadowers, e-shadowing. The University of Colorado School of Medicine has a program where you can watch some great produced videos. And if you want an official certificate from them, you can pay a little bit of money to get an official certificate. You don't have to include it on your application. So include it, talk about it. It is what it is.
Yeah. Agreed.
Hun asks, I want to be a pathologist. I've applied to an internship at a body farm. Ooh, is that the one in Tennessee? For this summer, and I'm scrounging to find paths to shadow. How else can I prove my interest in this field to admissions? You don't. You don't. So, Scott, what do you think here? We very often talk to students who, like Hun, is like, I know I want to be a pathologist. All of their activities scream, I want to be a pathologist. Their personal statement then reads like, I want to be a pathologist. What are your thoughts from a med school perspective when students are coming in basically saying, I want to be this, train me to be this, I don't care about anything else?
I think that the admissions committee views it as very naive. I think that it's viewed as, we don't train pathologists here in medical school. What we train is MDs, and everybody basically gets the same training except for a little bit of differences in the elective year. Fourth year typically, there you kind of do some electives and stuff, but basically, everybody's going to be doing the same stuff from most of the medical school experience. And so I think when somebody in their application says, this is definitely what I want to be, it's viewed as kind of as naive. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily it's viewed negatively, but I do think it comes across as quite naive about the process.
Yeah. Vernie, you have thoughts?
I was just going to say, I would also worry, do you want to be a pathologist because you don't want your patients to talk back to you? So you don't want to deal with live people. Right. You kind of have to convince them that you do want to work with live people. Yep. So,
yeah. And that's the big thing that I was going to focus on is when a student comes in very closed-minded, How are they going to be on their rotations?
Right.
When you are doing your surgery rotation, which is a little bit more applicable to pathology, if you're dissecting, doing autopsies, etc., you may like that. But when it comes to your family medicine rotation, your internal medicine rotation, how are you going to be in those rotations with this mindset of like, this is dumb, I want to be a pathologist? And so that is the type of kind of reaction that I get from students who are so dead set on something, is I'm worried that you're going to be closed-minded about those things. And I'm worried about those things because I was that way. I went into medical school knowing I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. Like, that was my goal. That's why I went to med school. I want to cut people. I want to put them back together so they can go enjoy their sports, their life, etc. And so I'm sitting in histology going, this is stupid. Like, why am I studying histology? This has nothing to do with orthopedics. And it was such a closed-minded kind of mentality that I struggled in medical school because of that until I fixed myself eventually. So be careful.
Yeah. Good advice.
Yeah. Very good advice.
The goal of your primary application, the goal of your application in general, is to talk about why you want to be a physician, not why you want to be a specific specialty.
Yep.
That's right.
Save that for residency applications.
Right. That's right.
And good question, hon. We get it all the time.
Absolutely.
So you're not alone in wondering this. Thank you for bringing up the important topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Garage Bob, what's up, Garage Bob?
Whoa,
We touched on if it was appropriate to send a letter of intent after an interview with no decision. Would a letter of intent after being waitlisted back in November be appropriate now as well?
Absolutely. I would say, yeah, for sure. Because, especially when from the waiting list, if it gets to that lateness in the cycle. So I'm talking about April, May, June, that time period. Then what the medical schools are doing is they're trying to fill a place in their class. If a place has come open because somebody pulled out or delayed or whatever. And so that might be very helpful when they look in the file and they see this person absolutely says they will be here. That could be, a differentiator between you and somebody else that, didn't send a letter of that type. And so I would say now would be a very appropriate time for that kind of letter in the circumstance that you're talking about, Garage Bob.
Yeah. The question I would potentially ask as a follow-up is this pre-interview wait list or post-interview? Post-interview, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. There's some schools that do pre-interview holds and wait lists. I want to pull up one here from Adawale. I missed the Mapped Black Friday sale. Will I have to wait until November for the next lovely sale? I bet if you email info@map.com, Rachel may be able to help you out. So we're friendly here. If you didn't know, we offer one-on-one advising. So if you're someone who's struggling with writing your essays, have questions about your journey, you need some interview prep, we can help you with that. We also have our amazing Mapped software that you can sign up and use as well, and have chat advising built into Mapped as well as an extra cost for now, potentially. Maybe.
And we can be as brutally honest as you want us to be. If you can take it, I can dish it.
We should have a meter of like Rachel honest, brutally honest, or Ryan brutally honest. Like, which one do you want?
It's absolutely a spectrum. We're all going to be honest. How much do you want it wrapped in velvet?
Right.
Okay. I saw a good one and then I lost my place. Okay. Jawad
asks, DO stigma. Are DOs not as successful as MDs? Are there discrepancies in income? There is DO stigma. There's stigma about everything in life. So yes, there is still some DO stigma. It's going down every year. as more of the crusty old white guys retire from practice and leave their residency program director spots. But there's still some stigma out there. Usually it's kind of cornered in more of the elite programs and institutions out there. DOs are just as successful as MDs, make the same amount of money as MDs. There's no discrepancy in income there. Once you're a physician, you're making bank, hopefully. Sasha asks, I had a 4.0 in my freshman year, but in OChem, I got an A-. Dun, dun, dun. An A- isn't a bad grade by any means, but it ends up being a downward trend since an A- is a 3.7. How is this viewed by adcoms? Oh, Sasha, we love
bless your heart.
Bless your heart. Yeah.
Okay, so the good news is here, students have been listening to us talk about upward and downward trend, right? That is really resonating. People are hearing us when we say not all GPAs are created equal. Yep. The piece that we need to get more clear is usually when we're talking about that, we're talking about people who have lower cumulatives and are trying to do some reparation. So if you have 3.7 your freshman year, and that means that your overall freshman year is still probably like 3.9 something, no one's even going to blink. No one's going to be looking at those trends. Right. It's more about, and again, there's not a black and white rubric, but as a more relevant example, if you have a 3.3, I'd be interested to see, were you killing it and then you fell off as the sciences got harder? Or did you have a rough semester somewhere early and then you recovered? Right. But yeah, Sasha, we answer these questions because we want to clarify, but also be careful because the people who don't have grades as awesome as yours, they're all going frowny faces right now.
Do not need to be a perfect student to get into medical school.
And by definition, a trend is several credits, right? You know, a semester, 2 semesters, one drop in one grade in one particular semester is not considered a trend.
Nope.
That's right. Very good point.
I think I want to make a shirt. You don't need a 4.0. Justin asks, is there any hidden dress code doctors expect during shadowing? I don't want to show up in a suit and tie and get weird looks. Yes, a suit and tie, you'd probably get some weird looks.
Yep.
Right. So the doctor attire, even if you are planning on shadowing in the operating room, unless you are told otherwise, is business casual. Yep. So you're wearing khakis, maybe some dressier pants, a shirt and a tie. You don't need a suit jacket or a sport coat or anything.
Good question.
I have so many ties upstairs. I used to love shopping for ties, and then I got into the military and went active duty in the military, and now they just sit. I don't wear ties anymore. So maybe I
haven't worn a tie forever.
You know what I want to do? I'm going to start a pre-med tie fund. If you are a pre-med out there who needs some ties, let's figure out how to get you some ties.
Now, I have a bunch of bow ties.
I could never rock the bow tie, but yes, bow ties are completely appropriate as well.
I love the bow tie. Love the bow tie.
I like this. I want to figure out a way to do something for the whole gender spectrum, but I like where it's going.
Yeah.
All right. We'll get back to you guys. It's like isitclinical.com. It's there. It's just not done. You can go there now and it just says website waiting. Or
yeah.
Okay.
Princess asks, I used to go to a Caribbean med school that did not require the MCAT. I decided to withdraw and start studying for the MCAT and apply to U.S. med schools during interviews. Do I mention that? Actually, Princess, you have to mention that on your applications. They will ask on your application, have you matriculated to another medical school? And so you would say yes. It doesn't matter that it's a Caribbean medical school. And then you'll have to talk about that. So, yeah. And as long as you have a good reason why you withdrew and you weren't kicked out of school, then it shouldn't be a huge issue. There may be some questions around it because schools may be a little bit skittish of like, are you going to quit again potentially? But yeah, crush the MCAT. I'm actually glad that you did that. The Caribbean medical schools that don't require the MCAT typically have a harder time of getting licensed in the States. Not every Caribbean medical school is eligible for license in California, which is typically the strictest licensing body in the country. And a lot of other medical schools, or not medical schools, medical boards in each individual state will use California's recommendations.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Princess, not only are you going to have to answer yes to the have you attended medical school before, but you have to list every school you've attended, which includes medical schools in other countries. So you'll actually be listing that coursework and everything. It won't necessarily count towards your GPA, but you're still going to have to show them all of it. Right. All right. Do we ask questions here? Jordan asks. Yes. Right here.
It's a very meta question.
Yeah. I usually say ask on map.tv because that's simplest, but actually any of the Facebook groups, any of the YouTubes, right? This is going out to multiple channels. So if you're seeing us answer questions that aren't where you are, it's just because it's being asked on another channel.
Yeah.
Awesome. Use Guy McFly. I love the Kool-Aid guy jumping through. Does being a psychometrist administering IQ tests at a neuropsychology clinic count for clinical experience? That's an interesting one.
I would say no. I think I'm probably being a little conservative here, but I would say no.
Yeah, I don't know. Like my father-in-law is a neuropsychologist, and so I know some of the tests that he does, and so a lot of the testing are puzzle type things and asking questions. I would probably lean towards no as well. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
it does seem like some of it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, it does seem like some of it is, how are you administering tests? There's a big difference between handing someone a bubble sheet and then, like you said, interacting puzzles, talking with them. But yeah, I lean towards no also.
Yeah.
Try Hard Ninja 753-82949. There was an academic integrity report filed against me, but after a case review process, it was found that I did not violate academic integrity and no record of this was retained. Do I have to report? Nope. You were exonerated. Lena asks, I want to apply this upcoming cycle, but I'm not sure I will graduate on time to matriculate. Is it okay to apply anyway and then defer to admissions next year? I wouldn't bet on it.
No.
Yeah, not every school is friendly to deferring. So
no, I agree.
Yeah. I had this conversation recently with a student in Canada who's applying to U.S. medical schools. Because of COVID, they're a U.S. citizen. They're in school in Canada. Because of COVID, they had to come home. They couldn't get back up. And so one required thing that they had to do had to be pushed back. And they're probably not going to graduate until September, potentially August. And I was like, you shouldn't apply. You're going to have to wait another year.
That's gotten very close.
Yep.
Yeah, it's such a common misconception. We're so used to saying school starts in the fall, but med schools in the U.S. start anywhere from the week around the 4th of July to Labor Day. A lot of people are doing orientation in early mid-July. You're moving to school in June. So don't plan on having that summer free.
Nope.
Ooh, exciting one from Lauren.
Lauren, how Hi, Lauren. How are you? I have an interview with my first choice school on Friday. Yay! I only have 30 minutes for a one-on-one with my interviewer. Is it rude to ask if they have read my personal statement? Should I assume they read it to save time? Ooh. So here's an interesting thing. I love to tell students, never assume anything.
Right.
Even if it's an open interview. Just because they have access to something doesn't mean they've actually accessed it and read it and retained it and whatever. And so you don't need to add stuff like, as I wrote about in my personal statement, or as you probably have seen here, like just completely get rid of that information and just answer the question to the best of your ability, whether or not you assume they've read it or not.
Yeah.
So you don't want to come across as being snarky.
Yeah. Yeah. If you were interviewing someone, Scott, and they were like, have you read my personal statement? And to me, like, that's like, have you taken the time to make sure and I can't think of the right word right now, but it does seem rude to potentially want to ask that.
Do you really know who I am? Sorry.
Yeah. And even just as you said, Ryan, I would eliminate the phrase, as I said in my application. That just comes across as snarky to me.
Yeah.
And like, I would be like, excuse me?
Yeah, well, and we get this question a lot because people say like, well, I got an interview question, but I didn't want to use that example because I already used it in my PS or activities or secondaries. They might not have read it. They might have read it and not remember. Use the best example you have. And Lauren, we're not saying you're being rude by asking this. We're just saying the optics of asking your interviewer that. It's a little bit like, did you do your homework for me? And, you know, the med school applicant is not in the position to ask those questions.
That's right.
But yeah, it's a source of stress. I mean, we get that with mock interview prep where people are like, are you going to spend 2 hours reviewing my application before the mock interview, just like my real interviewer were? And I'm like, no, just like your real interview, I'm going to walk in cold and see what you do to impress me. Right? Because even the ones that have open, maybe they've looked at it. Maybe.
Definitely.
All right. We're coming here to an end. We've probably got time for one more. Let's take a look.
Mudasir asks, how bad does it look to retake your MCAT if you improve the second time around? I am also a master's student who did not have the best undergraduate GPA. The dreaded myth of an MCAT retake. Verinia?
It does not look bad at all. Don't worry about it, Mudasir, especially since your score went up. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, one more. That's a good one.
Gloria asks, should I go with a unique but risky personal statement or stay safe with the usual format? Describe some activities and contribution to why I want to go into medicine. Scott. I've seen some interesting ones, like a letter to my future self or stuff like that. What do you think?
Well, I do agree that it's a little risky, but risky is sometimes good and sometimes not good. So I think to me, it depends on who the reader is and who the admissions committee member is that maybe is the primary for your application as to where they're, different committee members are going to have different reactions to something that's edgy. And so I would say, is it just a binary there? Do you have to be risky or do you have to be conservative? Or is there a middle ground where you can kind of include some of what you consider to be risky elements in your personal statement without going the full bore out? So, think about it as a continuum as opposed to a binary, and see if you can kind of come to a middle ground, maybe.
As up on the screen, Application Academy starts on January 18th. We have, I think we worked out 40 weeks of kind of curriculum and work together. We understand that not everyone can afford working one-on-one with one of our advisors. And so Application Academy is a great opportunity at only $500 or $125 over 4 months to work in a group setting with the wonderful advisors here on Mapped. We'll have at least 2, 4, 5, almost 6 hours a week in content and review and interaction and Q&A, only for people who are in the middle of the application process or starting the application process for this next cycle. So applicationacademy.com to go check it out.
Yep. All right. Well, we need to wrap up. We did not get to everyone's questions. It was a very popular week, but we are here again next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Ryan's got his Instagram Live Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern. So come back, ask more questions. We'll get to you.
Yes, we will. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.